creative journey. It's easy to get lost, but don't worry, you'll lift off. Sometimes you just need a creative pep talk.
Hey, you're listening to the Creative Pep Talk podcast. I'm your host, Andy J. Pizza. Today on the show, we have an extremely special guest, Malaka Gharib, author and illustrator of the new graphic memoir, It Won't Always Be Like This, which is about her summers that she spent with her dad in Egypt as a teen. I read this book and was like immediately like, I really want to have when you have a book that just hits you and you wish you could talk to the person who made it, just like, this meant something to me. I am, privileged enough to sometimes, when that happens, have a podcast where people actually agree to have those conversations. That's what this is. I was so moved and excited about this story that when Malaka said that she would be on the show, I was over the moon and through the roof. And this conversation was everything I hoped it would be and more. And it was a complete dream. And speaking of dreams, you may have also heard of Malaka's previous graphic memoir, which is called I Was Their American Dream. That was a really popular book as well. Malaka is a storyteller like I am, and she works in visual formats like her two graphic memoirs, but she also works as an editor on podcasts at NPR for her day job. So as you can imagine, there was tons of things for us to hash out and talk shop about creative process-wise, in terms of visual storytelling and just a creative practice. I really, really love this conversation, and I love this creator, and I know that you're going to as well. So let's get to it. But really quick, before we do that, we need to have a quick word from our lovely sponsors who we love, who we couldn't do the show without, and who make amazing things that are relevant to creators just like you. So let's get to that. There's nothing better than getting better. And if you're anything like me, you may be a little bit of a self-help junkie. I know for me, when I first started to find a growth mindset in my own life, where I learned that I was able to learn things and it would actually make a difference to my creative practice and my life, I started to become obsessed with finding those juicy ideas that really enable exponential growth in my life. And that's why I love things like Skillshare, is because it is a place where experts that have learned things the hard way help you learn things the easy way. That sounds like a tagline, but it's not. I just made it up because it's the truth. Maybe I'll take that, because I feel like that's what I try to do on this show. Skillshare, you're not having it. Anyway, accomplishing growth is very satisfying. If you are like me, you agree with that. Skillshare makes it possible. Learn about illustration, design, photography, productivity, marketing, storytelling, all kinds of stuff. I love that this ad became an argument with the sponsor, a one-sided argument. I love you, Skillshare. I'm sorry. They have Skillshares. How about I just call them that? I'll add a S to them from now on. Go check out Skillshares. You won't find it at Skillshares.com/creativepep because it's just Skillshare. This is a nightmare. This is the most ridiculous ad I've done in years. Anyway, Skillshare.com/creativepep. You can get a free premium membership as a trial. And go check out some of the great classes on there. I think I stopped in the middle of a previous sentence. Somebody help me. But they do have short classes with tons of goodies. One of the classes they just launched is with one of my favorite creators and one of my favorite people, Morgan Harper Nichols, author, poet, visual artist. She just launched a class called Mindful Digital Art, 5 Creative Prompts to Reflect and Meditate. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that halfway through the episode. But for now, just know you can get a free trial. Skillshare.com/creativepep. wanted to start with something that was a little bit of a concern after researching your work and watching some of your talks. And this kind of gets on a personal note, so I hope you don't mind. As I was looking through everything, I started to worry about like what's left in your life when, you lost pop culture when you were coming into teenage years. Then the death of ska, the death of Tower Records. Then you just wrote off music completely. And you were in the food game and just magazines. And I was like, please tell me food is not dead to you. Like, as a personal foodie, you still love food, right?
Actually, food is no longer an interest for me.
What's left?
I know.
You have all these very distinct phases, which I relate to. As someone with ADHD, I have the phases, but I just thought it was funny that you have these very specific eras.
I have a new era.
Okay.
I'll tell you what my new era is.
Yeah.
So this is sounds so lame, but like I have this this newsletter called A List of Beautiful Things.
Yeah.
Where I sort of curate these, this like internet ephemera, and it's like art, apps, movies, music, illustration, excerpts, and quotes, and TikToks, and things that have really moved me, and that things that I find like aesthetically beautiful to me. And I try to sort of pinpoint what about it resonates with me and makes it aesthetically pleasing to me. And I've started to perform them in real life. So there's a poetry group here in Nashville, and they invited me to do a live performance of my newsletter, in which I basically do a show and tell and read poetry and excerpts and show film clips and things like that. And that's been my new era. This is my new era.
Awesome. I'm glad to have an update on it. And I figured as soon as I was writing that, I thought, I bet food's over. I bet
food is over.
done.
I'm not interested. You know what I had for lunch today? I had Amy's chili mac, frozen chili mac.
You can count on Amy's.
Yeah, I've gone from like being hypercritical about food to just being a trash person.
It's just fuel to you now. It's dead.
Yeah.
That's so funny. And I very much relate, but I also noticed that throughout all those phases, it seems like storytelling, magazines, journalism is a thread that kind of runs through all of that. And I was curious, like, what do you think that's all about, this kind of cataloging the phase that you're in? And what do you get from the process of doing it? Or what do you get from your favorite outlets of these stories? Like, why do you think that is such a through line for you?
I've been thinking a lot about this more critically, and I think that the main mean for me is that the MO to all of my art is to sort of compress like the maximum feeling to the smallest amount of space. I think that's what I liked so much about zines when I was a teenager. This idea that I could create my own world in the confines of a few pages. Same thing with why I went to I studied magazine journalism. I wanted to be a part of a team that is basically collecting all this information and curating it into this world presented to you in a $7 indie magazine. I never made it to magazine journalism because magazines died in 2008. Many folded.
Not just to you.
To everyone.
That was everybody.
Which sadly, that's why it prompted me to create my own indie magazine later on food, The Runcible Spoon, and then continue making zines and comics, which are also this idea of self-containing an idea in a small space. For me, it's kind of like you're putting together this puzzle and trying to find the right words and the images and combine them and sort of say something very succinctly. And if you look at my Instagram, I mean, my zines are becoming smaller and smaller. They're now like the size of postage stamps. Yeah. And I think that like, I've really loved this idea in comics of the economy of line, like saying the maximum with the least amount of pen strokes. I think of it as kind of a small joke to myself.
I love that. And also bringing up jokes, I was going to go to, it reminds me of the economy of words that you hear comedians talk about all the time of like how quick can you get to the punchline and it be as the maximum potency. And
I love that.
I've thought a lot about that too, in terms of like your thoughts and your feelings and the stuff that and your experiences are like the coffee beans. But in order for anybody else to be interested in it, you really got to get it down to the espresso. You have to get it down to something that can be like easily consumed, max potency. And I think it would make sense that you would make these graphic memoirs because, you know, graphic novels have that kind of potency in comparison to classic novels. You know what I mean? There's something so visceral and quick, and it hits you really hard. I feel like it's a good medium if that's your cup of tea or your cup of coffee to stay on the metaphor.
Yeah. I also think about like the importance of omission and space and white space. Like what you're not saying speaks volumes for you. It allows the viewer to sort of fill in the blanks, and the way that you make those connections with your words and your images also speaks to your own cleverness, right? Like I get tickled by the idea, like, oh, they'll make this jump with these two images. They'll make the jump. And I find that to be really challenging with graphic novels. And I love that in music too. Like, you know, in Al Green uses a lot of silence and space in his songs to sort of get his groove going. And your mind makes mental leaps. And in poetry, you see that too, obviously. So potency of words, but also the largeness of white space.
The potency of no words, the space in between. I love that too, because I feel like the best creative work, the moment is something that happens within your head. You know, I love, back to stand-up comics, I love when they don't need to say the punchline even, because they have set all the pieces up and then they can just sit there until you get it. I love that. It's so powerful because there's a respecting of the audience too, because you're like, I don't have to spell it out. Like you're gonna make.
I set it up for you. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
That's genius. That makes me so. That's the fun part.
Same.
Yeah.
I mean, that's people that listen to this show know that the mechanics of creativity and the kind of applied psychology side of creativity is my jam. So we're right on the same page there. So I want to talk a little bit about your new graphic memoir, which it's called "It Won't Always Be Like This," and I loved it. It was incredible.
Oh, thank you.
I really loved it, and it transported me to a place I've never been or experienced it in any way, but made it come to life. And then also it really did make me tear up several times. And so I know it's a crazy amount of work, and I just want to say congrats because it's really incredible.
Thank you so much. Oh man, I just, when you write something, you're usually doing it for yourself and you don't know, but you're also doing it for an audience. I'm sure you've talked about this a lot in your podcast. And you tell yourself it's not about an audience, but the thing is that you want to be understood and seen. You want your emotions to be understood and seen. So there is some sort of sense of wanting validation from the audience that what you created resonates. Yeah. And so it's really nice to hear that you felt that way.
It is so good. And I recommend everyone go get it. It's quick and potent. And I actually also, as soon as I finished it, gave it to my 14-year-old daughter, who is a voracious reader. And she loved it as well. And she felt all kinds of big feelings about the storylines. And I think you did an incredible job. Could you just tell us briefly like what the book is about?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm Filipino Egyptian American. I was very much into I grew up in Los Angeles. My parents got a divorce, and my dad ended up going to Egypt and spending the rest of his life there. And so I had to spend my summers back and forth between my dad and my mom, with my mom in LA and my dad in Egypt. And one summer when I was 9 years old, my dad told me that he was remarrying. and he had married this woman who was like kind of half his age and closer to my age, and that he would be starting a new family and living in Egypt permanently. And I was thinking, like, this is going to change our vibe, Dad. This is like totally going to mess up what we had. We had a great life, and now Hala, my stepmom's come along, and now I have to have a relationship with her, and she doesn't even speak English. And so the story is really about how I was able to forge a relationship with my stepmother and my siblings who were born after that, in that time period, and also just being a teenager and a young person in my early 20s, trying to understand my relationship to the Middle East, trying to understand my relationship to my Americanness. I had a lot of opinions about what it meant to be American, but then being dropped into a space where it was the Middle East, like, how do I carry myself? How do I purport myself? How do I have relationships with other people? And I never even picked up Arabic. So that was difficult. So this story is about trying to fit into a blended family. It's about trying to understand my place in the Middle East. And it's about ultimately the death of our family. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's like the death of our family unit forever and ever and after that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it is one of the I feel very privileged to do this podcast, and I've had the chance to talk to a lot of people who have made work that I just really love. And as you were going through it, I was like, I know this story because I just was feeling like I'm talking to the person that I just experienced this book from. And so, it's really good. And I thought, the specifics of it, I found it like it does that incredible thing where you go so hyper specific in what your experience was. And I found myself deeply relating on all these levels, including like visiting my mom. I grew up in Indiana, and I would visit my mom when she lived in West Virginia in the summer or in Florida. And in a very tiny way, I can kind of just relate to just being dropped in a place where like, I don't know any of this stuff. And obviously your experience was more extreme than that, but it just, the specificity of the writing just really brought it to life for me. So
thank you. Yeah. I just like, there was no internet back then too. So you had to sort of make your own fun. And
yes,
that was very sad and difficult and awkward. And it's just awkward. It's awkward when you don't know where to place yourself.
Yeah. I felt that one of the feelings that I experienced while I was reading it was that same thing. If I'm going to go be at my mom's in West Virginia without any of my friends, without any, like, she also didn't have like video games and stuff that I had at my dad's house. And I just felt that like there's a kind of prison sentence to like, I'm here now and there's none of my stuff here. And I felt that kind of like that feeling of just being like bored and stuck and all. You illustrated that so well. Is that why you became an illustrator? Because sometimes I felt like my notebook was my only friend, my only pastime. Like entertaining myself and yeah.
Yes. Sit quietly and draw in the corner.
Exactly. Yeah. So I heard in one of your talks, I was really struck by the last graphic novel you made, a graphic memoir, was a real discovery process. And I'm always interested in how creativity, we often have this like feeling like we need to make a statement, but often making the work is as much a discovery process as it is like, oh, I'm saying this or I know this. And I loved how you talked about with the last book, there was this discovery through the process of realizing you wanted this authentic American experience, but you felt like sometimes that was at odds with being the child of immigrants, only to realize that full circle, that is a very authentic American experience.
That's completely valid.
It's one of the, it's one of the quintessential American experiences, really.
Yeah.
And I loved that so much. And I thought it was so potent as a statement that I wondered if you discovered things that surprised you as you moved into this new story. Like as you went along, what did you learn about this part of your life?
I think the central question that I want to explore when writing It Won't Always Be Like This was how did my summers in Egypt and Qatar affect my worldview? And how was it possible for me to develop very deep connections with people without a common language, without a common understanding of social norms or culture and religion? This is a very Islamic country and Islamic family, especially in living in Qatar. It was, a lot of people are wearing abayas. It's more conservative than Egypt. And how is it possible for me to navigate all of these environments that were so different from Orange County, California, where I listened to punk music and went to Lakma with my mom and indie bookshops and drew comics and made zines and went to Tower Records. There's just a totally different lifestyle. And what I found from doing the book, to answer the first question, how did it shape my worldview? It taught me the second part. It taught me that it is possible to make these very deep relationships because you have to make an effort to connect with someone. And you don't really need that. You don't really need much to create deep connections with people. You don't really need language or common understanding. It's about making the effort to try to have a relationship with someone. And when that feeling is mutual, you can get a lot done. You can move mountains. You can find yourself smoking a cigarette with your stepmom at, age 22 and being like, yeah, I totally get that you are not happy right now. We don't need to say any words. I feel you. Let's just look at the view of the ocean and not talk. And that's okay. Like I'm there for you. So I realized that I understood and saw for the very first time as an adult the tremendous effort that my dad deployed to forge a relationship with me. I lived 7,000 miles away from my dad, and he was in an awkward position. Now he had 3 children, a new wife, yet he still insisted that I come over every summer to spend time with him. Even though he was working, that showed tremendous dedication of him wanting to include me in my life. And even though I found him very annoying and prescriptive and just conservative, and you don't get me, and you're living on another planet, Dad, all the teenage angsty things compounded by not having a shared culture. He was making the effort. My stepmother was making the effort. My siblings were making the effort. And so therefore I, in turn, had to make the effort, even if it was just a charade for the moment. And then I'll give a small spoiler here, but I guess you can see where this is going as the reader. But when my dad and my stepmom's marriage dissolved, I realized that all of those years that we had together, that was it. All of these efforts of trying, that was all the time that we had together as one family unit. And I ended up realizing I appreciated that we had that at all, than never having it.